And I've got my water nearby. So for anyone watching online, I may very well be hyperventilating. So there's no oxygen bar in this room. Shucks. All right, we still have a few people writing. Want to be respectful of the activity. Thank you for taking it so seriously. Okay. So you can continue writing. We're going to come back to this in probably 25 slides, but I needed you to do this now before I prime you with any other data. Okay. So now we're going to do one more thing. What I'd like you to do now is write down one thing you are personally worried about today. Anything. Anything. Just be careful because I may say your example out loud. So just make sure that our viewers, whatever you say is safe to say out loud. Okay. So what's one thing, maybe something that could be personal, professional, either. What is one thing you are personally worried about today? All right. Once again, we have a lot of people writing. Do this at home as well. I beg of you. This is a really great example of making communication theory come alive. Okay. Yeah, that's true. Be careful what you say. Okay, so what's one thing you're personally worried about today? How about a worry a year or two from now? It's something that you're worried about 1 to 2 years from now. Okay? There's a method to my madness. Bear with me. Okay, wow, we got some deep worries here. I see some really loud typing in the room. You probably can't hear that on air. Once again, trying to observe my audience. They're writing, they're typing, fantastic. All right, and one more before we start to discuss this. What is one thing you're personally worried about that is far away from where you live? It's far away. All right, this is perhaps a little more challenging. I see a lot of faces thinking about this. It's almost a little bit more difficult. As the questions move along, it becomes a little bit more difficult to think about. Yes, Howard?
When you say far away, does it have to be time or distance?
Oh, you tell me, Howard. You tell me. What's your worry, Howard? Yeah, darn it, Gina. You're making me think. That's exactly what this is about. All right. So if you're still writing at home or here in the room, for the sake of time, we're gonna talk about these now. So we're gonna have a little weather therapy, but I'm gonna go back to the previous slide here because I think it's important. So I'd like to hear, what are some of your worries today? Who's gonna be?
Winter impacts this weekend, traveling.
Okay, traveling this weekend. You're worried about that. Should I change my flight? Okay, so it's a little bit in the future. You don't know if you can change it now because there's some uncertainty there, maybe some probabilities of weather. Okay, so that's very, very interesting. What are some others? Yes?
My toe.
Your toe? Tell me about your toe.
No, I hit it on the coffee table and it was sore. Hey, get the...
Okay, so
No, and then
he hit a toe on a coffee
when
table.
I flew to Denver,
Yes.
and when I got to the hotel, I'm sitting there going, this thing's getting really red.
Yeah, okay,
And
so
it's
you're,
starting to get a little better, but I'm kind of concerned that if not, I may spend a day at the medical center having to get this dealt with.
okay, so we've got a time component. Do you go to the hospital now or in the future? We've got a red toe, ladies and gentlemen. We're very worried about a toe. We're going to check on you tonight. Okay, this is great. Yes, Paul in the background.
My son's health and the altitude. First time we've gone up here without stopping in Denver. That's,
Yeah, your son's health and the altitude. I mean, frankly, I am a little concerned that I'm going to hyperventilate and collapse during this talk. You know? Yes, another one.
I'm also really worried about Dale's toe.
What? Yeah,
It's really got me.
I have concern about his toe as well. So, all right. So we have a lot of concerns that are. Oh, yes, Greg. One more.
I think this is a carryover from the previous talk, but it's like I really am worried today and every day about just how binary our society is.
Yeah, how binary are say the yes, no, that we can't see the other perspectives and that there's a spectrum of responses. Absolutely. These are some concerns of today. Fantastic. How about your worries that you wrote down a year or two from now? What do those look like? Brad?
I'm always worried about working in TV.
Always worried about working so there's uncertainty about your professional career, or what will it even look like a year from now? The communication landscape changes so quickly, you know, so there's uncertainty, that probability again of the uncertainty of how that all will work out.
Always my kids, like school-wise.
Yeah.
You know, where are they going to be school-wise? Are they going to stay in charter schools? All that stuff.
Are they? What school will they be in, and how close will it be? There's a spatial component. Yes.
I solved that, and I'm just worried about family health.
You're worried about family health. Absolutely. We don't know whether we'll have it a year or two from now. Yes.
Worried about just how bad, hacking and their privacy and, what is true with alternative facts is going to be on our society.
Yeah, the alternative truths, trying to tease out credible information in this communication landscape. Absolutely. Yes, in the back. Where will the summit be? Yes, we have spatial uncertainty here. Yes, Dave, did you have another?
I was going to say, we need to use the mic. We have online viewers saying, what did they say?
Yes, and sorry, and I'm trying to repeat that. I'll do better at repeating those as well. Yes, Howard.
First, to Brad's point about employment, I'm worried about that every day, not just in 1 to 2 years. I'm just worried about my in-laws. They're getting older,
Yeah.
and they've had some health issues, and I don't know what their health is going to be in the next
Absolutely.
1 to 2 years.
Absolutely. Okay. Oh, yes. Helen.
I'm worried about the impacts of climate change.
The impacts of climate change, and it's fascinating that now we're talking about 1 to 2 year impacts of that versus in the previous talk, right, 20 years or 30 years from now. Yes, we've brought them a little closer. We're going to talk about that in a second. All right, yes.
I'm worried on how I can juggle my life. I see it getting busier
Complicated.
and busier and busier, and
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I get to enjoy life before life comes to an end for me
Yes,
or my loved
the
ones.
personal work-life balances. Yes, absolutely.
Thanks for that.
How about those worries that are? This is good. See, we're bonding. I told you, weather therapy is very good. Okay.
We've done that a long time ago.
Okay. Yes, but now I get to bond with you. This is different. Okay. How about a worry that's far away from where you live? Yes, we've got a hand in the back, Jeff. I think in the back.
Stand by.
I don't know. I think it went 1, 2, 3. I'm sorry, my peripheral vision here.
Yeah, Jeff Baradelli. I'm worried about the long-term prognosis of Dale's toe, because I mean, you can think short-term, but in a more serious light,
Yes.
I'm concerned about Citizens United and the stability of our government going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. There's uncertainty, and that impacts so many aspects of our life. So I think. Oh.
Well, I'm not going to say that.
Okay.
Okay.
I was just going to say 2020.
So I'll be her proxy. Jennifer from Kentucky is worried about 2020. What?
That's not
What did
nice.
I do?
You're supposed to talk about your worries.
Well, she was looking at me saying, all right, anyway, sorry.
So a risk.
So
a worry
so
that's
right,
far
so
away.
far away from me. The government shutdown's kind of far away because I live on the West Coast, not in D.C., and I'm worried about that.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. And I can tell you, I live in D.C. and I worry about this on a daily basis. So it's particularly close to me, but that's far away from you. Isn't that interesting? That one thing, the same thing, can be close to me but far away from another. We're going to talk about that in a second. Yes. So I think in the back, and then we'll do one more.
I
And sorry, folks online, we're trying to pass around the mic.
Tony Giannatis, I'm for far away. I'm worried about whether China and India are going to burn all that coal.
Yeah.
'Cause if
So
they
what
burn
are
all that
other
coal, we're
countries
screwed.
doing to contribute negatively or positively to climate change? Certainly, yeah, and that's far away, and you don't have a lot of control over that. I think we had, we had the back corner. We had one more. She's had her hand up. She's been so patient, and I'm sorry I don't have your name memorized yet.
Jennifer Broom, as somebody who spends an enormous amount of time in the outdoors, I'm worried about the loss of our natural wonders and also our public lands.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really amazing to be out here while our mountains are covered in snow, but just a year and a half ago, I was out in this area studying wildfires, and what a different perspective it is to see precip, rather than talking about drought and wild urban interfaces and the wildfire risk. Absolutely. Okay, so there was a method for my madness to go through some weather therapy. And it's because in communication, there is a theory called construal level theory. Okay, this is something we all go through as humans. There are different ways to talk about distance, and it's psychological distance. We often think of the word distance as if we're using Waze or Google Maps and it's 5 miles to a location. Yes, spatial distance is a type of distance, but there are many. What this theory kind of broadly says, it's the extent to which we think concretely or abstractly about an object, event, or in this case, a risk, be it a weather risk or climate risk. It's abstract to concrete. The more distant it is, yes, the rabbit ears are very important here, the more distant the object is, the more abstract it feels to us. The more close it is, the more concrete it is. So let's discuss the rabbit ears, because we need to kind of dissect what the heck these distances are. Okay, there are 4 types. All right, I'm going to walk through an example of each within the weather domain, but I depend on interactivity here to break this down. There's no right way to interpret these theories and how they apply, so hearing your ideas of how they apply or challenges you feel in the broadcast environment, fair game to interrupt me at any time. Temporal distances, so this is time. So that's why I had you struggle with worries about today, or maybe in a year or two, or something that's far away. And even when I said far away, Howard, you were like, well, wait a minute, far away in distance or time? Exactly, yes. Both exist, and you gave me examples of all of those. So temporal distance, is it close in time, our flights this weekend, or is it a year or two from now? If it's a year or two from now, that's gonna be a little bit more challenging or abstract. There's spatial, events that are literally distance-wise in terms of mileage, right? They are far away from where we are. Social distance. So right now, I feel a little bit close to all of you, but I am not a broadcaster. And indeed, we got some pretty good heft and power in this room as broadcasters go on. That's a little daunting for me because I don't come directly from your community. So I'm socially not so far away, but I also have to recognize I'm not so socially close either. That's given me a little bit of anxiety the last couple days preparing for this talk. And then hypothetical distance, probability, uncertainty, things that are perhaps a little bit more abstract to even discuss because it's possible they may occur, but it's also possible they won't occur. And how do we struggle with this? So we're going to walk through each of these with a weather hazard in mind to kind of see how this might break down. So let's talk about temporal distance. Okay? So again, events and objects may happen now, near in time, or far away in time. And indeed, as your job as broadcasters, you often communicate risks and events that are all 3 of those. So here's an example. If we were in hurricane season, if this was Michael or Florence, right? We're communicating, it's happening now. But I was just talking about Hurricane or Michael with Florence and Michael with Katie earlier. And the thing about those 2 storms is they were different. Florence was a long fuse event. We had 10 days to talk about it, right? Actually, probably in the meteorology community, upwards of 2 weeks with model development, right? That means that you're communicating about it 10 to 14 days before it even makes landfall. 10 to 14 days before it makes landfall is very abstract to me. What do you want me to do with what you're telling me 10 to 14 days out? Am I supposed to evacuate now? Well, no, that's a little bit too far, right? That's a little too early to evacuate. But yet, what is it I'm supposed to do? So I feel abstractness to that. But when it's a day before landfall, now I can process it more concretely. And there are different cognitive processes that happen. It happens to you as a meteorologist, but it also happens to us, the viewers, who are trying to interpret your information. So if it's happening now, if it's near in time, it's more concrete. If it's far away in time, it's more abstract, and that's harder for us to process. Again, reflect on the fact this process happens to you as well. When you see the first model output 2 weeks in advance, how are you thinking about it? Do you want to go on air and talk about it right away? Hell no. Pardon my French, right? Hell no. But because we have other types of distances here, which we're going to talk about. Hypothetical distance. Will it still be there in 10 to 14 days? So what's the risk in communicate, right? Oh my gosh. Right, yeah, we have to wait for more information, right? So it's very hard, even for you and for viewers, to deal with this concrete abstractness for this temporal distance. Okay, this one's going to feel a little bit more comfortable, spatial distance, right? That's probably one of the first things you thought about in distance, right, was spatial distance. So events and objects may happen right here, nearby, or far away, miles or hundreds of miles, on another continent, for example. So if a wildfire is happening nearby, for example, we process it in detail. And indeed, I did focus groups out in this area about 1.5 years ago, and they've got concrete descriptions of their experience out here. But if a wildfire is happening far away in a state or region or country that is not our nearby, right? It's not close to us. We process it abstractly, which means that we're looking at the big picture or the gist. So when if I'm in DC and I'm looking at wildfire coverage out here in the West, wow, that's terrible. What must that be like? But the problem is I don't know what that's like because I've never experienced it so closely, right? So as communicators, as practitioners of communication, it's our job to kind of help make it as concrete as possible for those who are not spatially close. You can see relations here to climate change and some of the prior discussions earlier this morning. Yes, can we get a microphone, or do you have one? Perfect.
Got one here. Rick Tolman, University of Alaska. Can you speak very briefly to, here you talk about the spatial distance. How does an individual's experience with a similar type of event play into this? Here in Breckenridge, while the fires in Oregon may be spatially far away,
right,
they know exactly what wildfire means. They
right,
personally experience that, as opposed to, say, somebody in Washington, D.C.
Right. So there's going to be a spectrum. So to the point about the concern that we're very binary in terms of our processing, there's a spectrum of abstract to concrete. So it doesn't have to be so far, you're so far to the right of concrete, so far to the left of abstract, right? So you can be somewhere in between. And so our experiences will alter where you fall on that spectrum. And actually in 15 slides from now, I'm going to show you some research on how experience plays into this. So we'll break that down a little bit more. Any other questions so far? Fantastic. All right, we're gonna keep going. Okay, so this social example. So I kind of gave you an example earlier of I'm not a broadcaster, so I don't know everything about your world. So that makes me a little bit distant from you. But I'm a weather risk communicator. I've hung out with you guys for 15 or so years. So I feel as if I can relate to you at least a little bit. So I'm not super far away, but I also don't want to say that I know exactly what your world is like. So I probably, because of my experience, fall somewhere on, depending upon what we're talking about, the middle of the spectrum of abstract to concrete from now. So the point is, if you feel similar to the person or the group, you feel socially close, open, and secure with them. Again, weather therapy, you had no problem jumping in and sharing your worries about potentially broken toes, right? Or your flights this weekend. You shared that because you have a social closeness here at this summit. But if you feel dissimilar to the person or group, you feel socially distant or closed off and insecure. So one of the things as broadcasters that you do is you try to build a relationship, a trusted relationship with your viewers to make them feel socially close to you. You want to relate to them, right? So that you can reduce the distance between you. So that's the idea of social. Yes, do we have a microphone? Microphone over here.
I just have a question about this upper right-hand box. Does the distance change if they're indicted?
I'm not going to answer that question. we're just going to think about that one. Yeah. Is there a commercial break, Dave? All right, so great discussion, great consideration. We'll take that to the lunch later on. All right, and then the last type of distance is that hypothetical. So this comes into probabilities. This is something that really sits with us in this community, right? We can't always say for certain what the impact will be, whether an event will hit this area or another area, or exactly what climate change impacts will look like everywhere, right? So that's a challenge. And this was a flooding example. Of course, communicating the 100-year, 500-year risks of flooding, I think there's a lot of confusion. Even myself, I find it hard to kind of process that. But the idea of hypothetical distance, if it's more probable or likely, we process it more concretely. And if it's less probable or less likely, we process it abstractly. Okay, fantastic. Why would I tell you all of this? Because I want you to use it. Right? I actually want you to think about this in your jobs. So yes, I do want you to make sense of this, and I do want you to persevere in solving these problems. So the goal with this theory, okay, is in many ways you want to reduce the distance between you and a viewer, between us and the hurricane that's really far away, right? That's why we focus on impacts, right? We're trying to make it, what are you doing? You're making it more concrete. Otherwise, it's this thing that's rotating over the ocean, right? Well, what the heck does that look like for me, right? Why would that impact me? Your daily jobs essentially are, you're reducing psychological distance every day in your job. And I'm going to give you kudos. You do a very, very good job. The interesting thing is, though, is when you look at the research, they say to bring it even closer, right? So here are some colleagues. The articles are out there. If you don't have access, let me know. I can put you in contact with my colleagues. This is just one example. There are many. There is some really great articles on construal level theory, psychological distance with climate change and how to reduce distance. I think in many ways, as practitioners of this information, you're doing a great job with it, but happy to share those articles with you as well. I'm trying to bring the research community closer to you, right? I want to make sure we close the distance between research and practice. So some of the things they say to do is bring the risk closer to the individual. So, like I said, you do this. Show impacts. Make it local, right? Reduce the actual distance, right? Relate it to their personal direct experience. So if you know there's an experience that you can play upon in a positive way, remind them of that experience so that they can process it a bit more concretely. Bring the individual closer to the risk. So these are hard to interpret, even for myself, to be honest. Like, what does this mean? How do we do it? Rather than thinking in detail about the object or event, tie to the abstract, the longer term goal. Reframe the near term object or event to the goal. So one of the things I was thinking about, this is more in a personal life. If you're thinking about you want to be healthier, perhaps lose weight, right? We're in New Year's resolution time, right? So that's kind of a big theme of January, the push for gym memberships, right? I've got to lose weight. But if you only focus on just losing weight, you're going to weigh yourself every day, and that's really daunting. It's too abstract. You're not going to see that change so dramatically. But process in the longer term goal of, I want to be healthy. And your actions of going to the gym now are part of that. Check success, right? You can frame it in this way that makes it a little bit more concrete and a little bit easier to sort of process. I don't know if that example is perfect. If I have any research scholars out there who have a better example, I welcome that online. The third one, design construal congruent messages. So this is interesting, and in fact, this has to do in the land that I'm going to show you in a few slides, visual verbal redundancy as well. The idea is if you're talking about something abstract, you almost want to stay in abstract. If you're going to talk about something concretely, stay in concrete, but the back and forth can be sometimes difficult. I don't know how we solve this one in our community, actually. I'm not sure if we can have congruent messages, because I think the whole idea of showing local impacts is we're trying to take the abstract and make it more concrete. So I'm not sure in the practice of operational meteorology whether this is actually possible. So I actually want to talk to more researchers and ask them, how on earth do we do this, right? All right, so in many ways, we do this. So one of the suggestions they said was bring the risk closer to you. So I titled the talk Out of This World, right? Literally, we are taking data collected out of this world, okay? we're bringing it and combining it with a bunch of observations on Earth. They sit in a bunch of computers. Operational meteorologists do amazing things, including all of you, right? And you produce a forecast. And I happen to live in DC, so I took Doug's forecast, right? And Doug Kimmer, he produced a forecast for us. Fantastic.
This is 2 days ahead of time. We did revise that.
Doug, for our online viewers, Doug wants you to know they did update this forecast. This was 2 days prior to the storm. Okay, so no problem, Doug. Great job, great forecast. Yeah, yes, very good job. Yeah, you did up it. Yep. So. All right, so you are bringing the risk. So you might be sitting there thinking, Eosco, like we do this already. Why are you telling me about all of this? I'm feeling kind of down here. Yeah, Howard's like, dude, I do this every day. This is really good. The issue for me is, because I love to observe all of you, I started looking at all of these graphics, and I started thinking to myself, are non-photographs close enough? Okay, so think about that. I'm going to go, that's a non-photograph, and I'm going to walk you through some theory in a second, right? Very simple theory, okay? That's a non-photograph. Would you agree on that? Yes, you made it. It's not a photograph. Okay. So are non-photographs close enough? In other words, have we closed the distance enough to make our risks more concrete to our viewers? And so I started looking at all of the things that we do in our community, and I thought, gee, I mean, it doesn't rain rainbow-colored Skittles, right? But yet we show precip like it's rainbow-colored Skittles. Right, this is a radar. This actually is a radar image of a tornado warning in upstate New York. This is a different tornado photograph of an event in Springfield, Massachusetts back in 2011. We're going to talk about both of these events. But, which one's closer? And in what way? Let's look at another set. There's Doug Kimmer again, right? We've got our forecast, but then we've got Doug checking out the snow. Which one's close? Which one is more concrete? Now, I get it. Doug, the photo was taken like during the storm, so you didn't. Yeah, so you didn't have access to. I'm not calling you out or anything. The point of this is to really think about what we're showing. Okay, here's another one. We got Greg. Where's Greg Fischel? There you are, right? So we're showing Florence and the spaghetti plots and the models, right? And I'm not criticizing doing so at all. This is not a criticism. This is a reflection on. Are our graphics that we show, reducing the psychological distance of our risks versus showing what flooding looks like? So I started thinking about this, and I started going into the theory on what I call visual typologies. And so in the philosophy area, there's something called indexicality, okay? Indexicality is this concept that it's the closest image of reality. So if you think of a photograph that you didn't doctor, yes? We can build a wall. I'm not going to go there yet, but we'll talk about that. Okay, so indexicality, think of a photograph that is unedited, okay? So we have to think kind of perfection here. It's the closest image. So if I take a picture of all of you right now, I should have brought up my phone just to take a selfie with you, it proves that you were in this room at one moment in time. I can't tell you exactly when unless it was dated, right, unless I had more information. But that photo proves that you were here. Now, if I had an artist sitting next to me, painting a portrait of all of you in this room, well, that doesn't prove anything. Maybe they had a photo that they were working from, or maybe they just were like, I really want to paint a picture of what a weather and climate summit would look like. And so they did, and you all ended up in it, right? But that doesn't prove you were here. So the idea is that a photograph is indexical. It proves the risk is incurring. It's as concrete as you can get. But non-photographs or even radars, now we can argue this, is not indexical. Indeed, a radar does show precip is occurring. To you, you're an expert. But again, does it rain rainbow-colored Skittles? No, right? So this is not a perfect reflection of reality. Yes. Microphone. Oh, right behind you.
Thank you. So unless, let's assume in this instance that we do not have a live picture of the tornado, of that tornado, are you suggesting we show a picture of some other random tornado and say,
I'm so glad
it's a
you
tornado
asked.
that may look like this, because a lot of us in the news business would have a problem with that.
I'm so glad you asked this, because I'm staring at all of your graphics and I thought someone needs to study this. So I did. This was my entire dissertation, was looking at, well, you know, we don't always have a photograph. So there has to be value in our non-photographic information, right? There just has to be. But is there? That, you know, so it was a very concerning question. Howard?
We read books, and not all books have pictures, and there's
Yeah.
great information there.
Absolutely.
And as Matt's point, we don't have pictures everywhere, but we have a radar that sees for hundreds of square miles.
Absolutely. Yes.
So,
yeah. You
yes,
look at,
pictures are not available. Graphics have to be close enough.
Right. Non-photographic graphics have to be close enough. Okay. Yeah, but could we do any better? Sure. Okay, potentially, right? And that was what I was wondering. I was like, okay, if there's an issue between these two, I don't know that there is, I haven't collected data yet, right? If there's an issue, how can we increase the value of our non-photographic information, right? Is there a way to do that? Or is there a way to insert photographic information in a way that makes your non-photographic impact graphics, right, come alive? How do we reduce the distance? Fundamentally, that's what I asked. So these were my research questions in my dissertation work. And I talked about this on Twitter the last couple days. Literally dusting off my dissertation gave me anxiety. For anyone who has a PhD, your dissertation just always is wrapped in emotions. I've literally had nightmares this past week. I thought I was defending my dissertation again. I was, right. Yeah, let it go. I know, it's very hard. Dissertations are really daunting. But I'm really excited to share this with you, because I hope that when I show some of the results, you're going to be just staring at the results going, oh my gosh, what do we do about this, okay? Because in many ways as practitioners, we're saying we're close enough, we've done the best we can. So the results are a little, in some ways, some of them are cool, some of them are going, oh man, as a practitioner, what do I do with this? So let's dissect some of the literature. All right, so the question is, how did we do this? So have any of you heard of perception analyzers or from Dialsmith? Given that you're in the TV industry, some of you are nodding. Okay, they're heavily used in political debates. So, you know, red for conservatives, blue for liberals, and white for undecideds, right? And during a political debate, they'd have a focus group, and these folks would be turning dials. Well, thanks to some colleagues and my advisor, we were sitting there going, you know, I love watching all of you on TV. Literally during events, I find your live feeds online, and I watch you from wherever you are. This is what I do. I do media analysis. I'm going, how can we collect data on your stuff? And one of my colleagues was like, you need to use perception analyzers, you know, and have people turn dials while they're watching coverage. I'm like, wow, okay, yeah, that's cool, so let's do that. It's really hard. This was a very different way of doing this kind of methodology. So we did. We had to give people instructions for many reasons. It was incredibly complex. Happy to discuss in detail, happy to share my dissertation with you too, but yeah, that would give me anxiety. So I'm just gonna show you this, right? So we asked them, during the study, they would watch a video, but before we would give them little sheets, right? And so one group would have perceived risk and another group would have perceived uncertainty, because I was trying to measure feelings. How much risk do you feel about the event that you're watching? How much uncertainty do you feel, right? I'm trying to get a measure of that abstractness while they're watching coverage. So we said, as you watch this video, please turn your dial to the right. At moments you feel high perceived risk or perceived uncertainty, please turn the dial to the left at moments you feel low uncertainty, right, or low perceived risk, right? So these were the types of questions that we asked, and so they turned the dial to the data. And what I'd like to do is show you what this looks like. So what I have is one of the videos that we used, and you can see the data. It literally puts the map of the data in real time over the video. So let's see if we can get this. Hopefully this will work and the audio will work. Let's see. Okay, so we're seeing the video, but we can't hear the audio. The audio is not actually particularly important. What is important, let me see if I can get this to show. No, it's not going to show up on a screen. So this is the graph of the data. and these are people's, dials.
And
moving.
so
Increase
again,
the value
the
of
area
photographic
just west,
information.
southwest
Do
of
we have
Springfield,
some of the
and
audio
also
here?
jives with
Again,
what
it's
we've
not
been
particularly
seeing
important
on our live
to hear all
cameras,
the audio,
and also
but you can see they're showing radar. Now you can very clearly see the data. Look at the jump once we went to a sky cam, okay? You can't generalize on that, but you can watch their perceptions. So they're perceived, I think this one might be perceived uncertainty. So perceived uncertainty is going to drop, right? Because they're feeling pretty certain that something's happening, and their risk is going to go up. So there should be an inverse relationship between uncertainty and risk in that case, and you can see that. But you can also see there's movement in the dials. Why? Well, because the broadcaster is talking, right? So we've got the audio here. What you say over the graphics matters, right? So this is an example. So this, again, I think this was, June 3rd, 2011, the Springfield, Massachusetts. It was like textbook, and it formed over the Connecticut River. Do I have any New England? We've got nods. Okay, New England folks here. Yeah, so they actually caught the tornado forming over the river. And so you can hear the broadcast say, I don't see it. I was like, oh, there it is. And so and the dials shoot right up, right? Because they're confirming it right with you live. So this one had a lot of photographic evidence. The other video we used was a fairly long track tornado, actually, in upstate New York, coming out of the southern tier. So WETM in Elmira gave us footage of that. One of the reasons we stayed with New England was, one, because of the student population we were using for the sample. We thought, well, if we're going to use students from New England area, we should probably use exemplars from that area as well, showing them, wedge tornado from Oklahoma or Alabama or something like that isn't going to be as, psychologically close to them, right? So it's going to be far away. So this gives you an example of what that data looks like on the video. This is what it looks like when you actually analyze it. So the perception analyzers collect data every 2 seconds. So 1 segment equals 2 segments. That means I had to take every video, make an Excel spreadsheet of every 2 seconds, and I had to say what type of visual it was. So basically, I said it was indexical. I think in my graphs we called it iconic. I think I'd go back and call it indexical, non-indexical, or very simply photograph versus non-photograph. That's basically what we're saying. So you had to code each segment for what visual was showing, okay? And then we also looked at your audio, because it's not just the photograph or video that's important, it's what you say. So this is an example of holistically all of the data. So you've got the perceived, that should be perceived risk. Sorry for the error there. You can tell I took this from my dissertation, and you make graphs really quickly. So the perceived risk is at the top, perceived uncertainty is on the bottom. For the Springfield tornado, again, not a lot of radar or velocity images. So the shaded area were those non-photographic images. So again, this is an example of and look at the variation of uncertainty, perceived uncertainty. It was up and down, up and down. What was causing that? Here's an example of the Elmira tornado, way more in the area of non-photographic evidence. So they showed a lot of radar and velocity images, right? Here, here, and here. Some critical audio there, right? Okay, so this is cool, right? But so what? What did it really say? Okay, so the first research question was, do individuals perceive a difference in uncertainty when looking at photographs versus non-photographs? And very simply, the statistics are there, but the simple point is, yes. Okay, and it was strong statistical evidence. They feel more uncertain when they're looking at your non-photographic data. Okay, so in this case, it was severe weather, so we're looking at radars and primarily velocity images, right? So the red-green, all right? So they feel more uncertain when you're showing that. They feel less uncertain, or conversely, more confident or certain, right? When they're staring at live video, if you show, photos of impacts, things of that nature, they feel less uncertain. Okay, all right, well this kind of makes sense, because a photo kind of proves the risk, right? It makes it more concrete. So again, by itself, this isn't all that disturbing or unusual. It's not like life-altering results, right? Okay, so let's move on. Research question 2 was, oh yes, Greg. Yeah, we need a mic in the back. Passing back, the mic is making its way back.
Greg Fischel, WRAL. One thing I have wrestled with for years and continue to this day is that we all know that the false alarm rate on tornado warnings, at least where I live, is huge.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I feel compelled to say, well, this storm is 50 miles away. The radar is sampling it at 3,000 feet.
Yes.
We don't know if the rotation exists at the ground.
Yes.
But then if I say that, that could mean the difference between somebody taking action and not taking action. And if there
Yes.
is something on the ground, I've just screwed them.
Yes. All true, all possible. We're going to talk about that because remember I made you do homework at the beginning of the session. So wait till research question 3 and 4 are probably the most interesting to all of you. Because like I said, this result right here, not life, I mean, we could probably have, as a practitioner, we probably already knew this, right? But we kind of needed the research evidence to prove it, okay? All right, so here's the perceived risk. Probably not at all surprising again. They feel less risk when we're showing non-photographs. They feel more risk when we're showing photographs or video footage, okay? Again, not life-altering, probably already knew it because photographs are more concrete, right? It's that we're reducing psychological distance.
They understand a photograph.
And
Much easier.
they understand a photograph. It's close to them. That's something they can directly experience with, okay?
People who don't know where they live on a map.
Right? Yep, looking at where you live in a map is sometimes difficult because of the lens. Think about that. We're gonna keep talking about this, but the lens, you're mass communicators. You're communicating for a whole area. You know, I meant to put this in. Brenda Phillips and her team, Joe Trainer, they've used the CASA radar. Are any of you familiar with the CASA radar? And okay, I've got a number of nods. Okay, so they've got a case study in the Dallas area where they've got a whole network of radars. And they created a weather app for this where it's social science embedded, right? Where they're tracking people's footprints. People's footprints are not that wide. They're not that spatially far. They're so basically what it showed was they go to work, they go to daycare or school to pick up kids, they go home and they repeat. Right? They basically create a triangle, and depending upon how far, okay, in DC, some of us have some pretty long commutes, mine's an hour, okay, you know, but so some of our footprints are a little bit bigger. But when you think about how small someone's footprint can be, right, and then you think about your viewing area, it's huge. And what does that mean? What did we learn about psychological distance? It's far. It's distant. That's not their whole area. So the fundamental way that we communicate, in essence, by nature, is slightly more abstract, right? I know we're doing the best we can. Again, this is not to say we're doing a poor job. This is to say we've got to empathize with our viewers that their world is so much smaller than what we show in a map. Yes. Or a microphone? Let me see. Sorry. I'm trying not to go out of my window here, but otherwise I could help with
And
mics.
that's why we get criticism for like cutting in during severe weather because
Yes.
it's not happening in
My
my
area.
community. Why are you covering?
Right.
They just don't get
Right.
that
Right.
part of it.
And I think you all do an excellent job of communicating that you feel a responsibility to communicate for everyone who lives in your area and that you understand, I know you're not at risk and I'm sorry for interrupting your evening routine, but I do have someone who's at risk and I've got to cater to the people who are at risk. That's literally my job, right? So, and I've seen you all do really nice Twitter posts, Facebook posts saying that some of you say it on air as well. And I think you do a really nice job of empathizing with those. Empathy goes a long way with, again, that social distance. Empathizing with those makes you feel a little bit more socially close. Okay, great discussion. If you think this is going to create discussion, wait for a couple slides. Okay, so again, not life-altering, right? Okay, but Greg, like you said, you're talking over these maps. So surely if I say something really important over a radar, like take action, surely that's, right? Surely that's concrete because I trust you. Okay, so what did we do? Well, we transcribed the whole video. We took each segment, every 2 seconds, again, that segment, I had to put in what was said in each of those 2 seconds. By the way, you all say a lot in 2 seconds. And then we coded them, okay? There's a whole research way to code, intercoder reliability, to make sure that we're really capturing, right, that I had multiple people looking to make sure that these codes were indeed what we were looking for. And so how I define them is threat messages, but I defined the code. So threat messages was anything that was possible. You were describing a risk but you used hedging language. It was possible that a tornado could form. To your point, if you're looking at radar, that's true. A radar doesn't necessarily prove that it's on the ground. We're getting awfully great with our technology. Dual pol has really changed the game, right? But it's still uncertain. Okay, so threat messages had some level of uncertainty. Impact messages were much more what is happening, very certain. It's windy. There's a tornado on the ground. It's raining. The rainfall rates is this. It's very certain language. And then we looked at efficacy or behavioral messages because, again, this is severe weather. Both of these examples had tornadoes on the ground. The Springfield one was much more photographic, right? It formed over the Connecticut River. It was like, wow, everyone was going, wow, a very impressive event. The Southern Tier tornado was rain-wrapped, so you couldn't see it. But if you go back and look at the Binghamton storm report from that, it actually was fairly long track. So it was a big event for upstate New York. So one of the things we looked at then was efficacy behavioral messages, because these are not necessarily common events in New England. What do we do? Where do we go? Right? So anytime you all said, take shelter, this is what you need to do, get away from windows, those were efficacy behavioral messages. And then there were the other messages. And it's interesting looking at my dissertation data again this week. I'd love to hear your ideas on some of the results on this. So the other messages really didn't have to do with weather. You were either talking to a news director, or you're trying to find a different sky cam view, or you lost a feed, or so it wasn't related to the weather. It was more related to technical difficulties. Or for example, we're going to try find another view for you. All right, so what did this look like? Because now I have to look for an interaction effect. It's not just the photographs by themselves, it's the photographs with your language. Okay, so on the left side of what I'm about to show you is the photo. The right side is your radar or your non-photographs. Okay, so here's some of this data. So this is for perceived uncertainty, okay? So again, we've got threat is in the black line, impact is in this solid gray, efficacy, those behavioral messages, is the dotted line, and those other messages of the SkyCam view is the black dotted line here. Okay, so let's look at this in parts. So indexical here, this is the photograph. Okay, so for perceived uncertainty, not at all surprising, right? We feel most uncertain when you're still talking about threats when we're staring at a photograph. So in other words, you're still using uncertainty language while we're looking at a photograph. There's a little bit of dissonance there. So it's a little bit more higher in perceived uncertainty. When we look at efficacy, you've told me to do something. You've told me to take action. Now, I'm confident. My uncertainty decreases, right? So again, you would expect, this is expected, okay? So now let's look at the other side. So these are your your non-photograph, your radars, your velocity images. So interestingly, they feel most uncertain when you're talking about other things while you're looking at a radar. So some people, in one example, while they might have been thinking about meteorology, but our coders, and they were right to do this, they couldn't find the red-green. They couldn't find the couplet because it was rain-wrapped. It was really hard to find on the Elmira tornado. So literally, there's a team of broadcasters. They're all staring at it, going, I don't know. Where? And from an audience viewpoint, it had nothing to do with meteorology, even though I think it did. That made them feel incredibly uncertain. So not only is the radar image a little bit abstract, now you're showing uncertainty on top of it with this other type of language. So now they feel really uncertain. That was the only one that was statistically significantly different. You can see that impact, efficacy, and and threat, they were all basically the same. So what does this mean? It means that even when you were giving efficacy messages, I felt no more certain. That's a little, now I'm starting to go, this data is starting to tell me something that actually concerns me. Okay, so that's the uncertainty. So let's go to perceived risk, because surely if I tell someone to take action while looking at a radar or looking at a couplet, surely that will make their risk go. Surely they'll get that, right? Okay, so here's the data on this. Okay, so again, same there. Here's threat is the black line, impact and other kind of, they overlap over here, right? And then efficacy here. I mean, just look at the map for a second. This is the photograph, this is the non-photograph, okay? So higher perceived risk, lower perceived risk. That right there, just looking at it visually, it makes me go, like we depend on non-photographic images. Like this is really worrisome to me, yes.
Have you concluded in any of the research that's why people go outside to see the storm first?
Is that why you go outside first to look at the storm? Honest to goodness gracious, if I should study all of you first, because if I can get meteorologists to take shelter, then I'm on to something. I mean, I'm just going to throw some love back at you. You know what I mean? You guys are the toughest bunch to get to take action, to take shelter. So honestly, I think we ought to study all of you first before we look at, but yes, part of it is they want to get situational awareness. They want to prove the risk exists. We know this. The warning communication work, Dennis Milletti, Sorensen's work, they tell us we want to confirm the risk. So a radar tells us that there's risk, but then we want to confirm it. So I do think it's human nature that we want to see the proof. But this does not make our jobs as risk communicators any easier, right? Okay, so let's dissect this a little bit more. So looking at the photograph, okay, efficacy, so behavioral messages plus the photograph was the highest. That prompted the highest perceived risk. And I don't think, if I recall, I've got it in my notes just to make sure I have it. I can give you all the statistical significance you want at the end, but I just kind of want to show you the results so we can get into a little bit more discussion, right? So efficacy messages are the highest while staring at a photograph. The thing that's most concerning, once again, is that there was no difference in a threat, impact, or efficacy message when looking at a non-photo. So they're looking at a radar, okay, or a velocity image, and your language essentially is something's falling short, okay? But let me throw myself under the bus. Could also be my methodology, right? Maybe I haven't captured something that would actually make this come alive. Yeah, Howard's like, yeah, it's not us, right? Okay, so, but there are questions here, right? So, I mean, I don't know about you, but like this is like sobering data now. Right, now I'm feeling like, damn, what am I supposed to do? Yes, Jeff, can we get a microphone in the back? Yeah, can we pass it back?
So, Jeff Baradelli, this is going to be a little bit controversial for this room because oftentimes when we show the radar, we will pop up a TVS, let's say, maybe some type of circulation icon.
Yeah.
What a lot of us would cringe at doing, but maybe we should be doing, is actually putting up a tornado icon on it. Because I would think when people see that tornado pop on the screen, even though it is not an actual photo, it's easily identifiable as a tornado on what looks to be just a bunch of red and purple and green.
Yeah.
So a lot of meteorologists would say, I don't know, I get that, but isn't it better to make people feel a little bit of a threat, even if it may not be a true threat because it's just a perceived tornado or not a real tornado?
And I can't tell you with any level of certainty whether that does change or not, but these are the types of things, when I think about your jobs and all of the graphical decisions you need to make, I don't think our viewers appreciate how much thought goes into them. And in fact, Howard, this was part of our discussion on our ride-in yesterday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Howard Burns at WSA Washington, to Jeff's point, the false alarm, the boy who cried wolf. When we do that, University of Maryland Police had a private company, and they put out a tweet, and they got retweeted by their student Terp Weather that there was a tornado warning for campus. National Weather Service had nothing. This created a lot of confusion, and
I would add the broadcasters in the area also didn't have tornado
No, we had
warnings.
nothing, and I took some flack I got on the UMPD and the student group. I didn't know it was a student group at the time, and I'm like, what are you doing? Because all you're going to do is breed confusion and potentially complacency with the false alarm. So I think your point has validity, but the danger is too many false alarms, then we're fake news. We're fake weather. We've got no credibility. So what's the balance, I guess, is the bigger challenge for us to answer.
Those are probably we have two different cases to look at. In that situation, again, it goes back to confirming the risk. So they got this message and they want to go. Here in the United States, we're so different than other countries in terms of our private sector meteorology. Other countries sometimes only have one source of information. And I actually think our world here in the U.S. of having the National Weather Service in an incredibly strong private sector, including weather industry as well as broadcast meteorology, is a strength. Why? Because the warning communication literature says we want to confirm the risk. And isn't it cool that we have so many different sources to do that? In that particular case, I think the challenge is that company may very well have seen a risk for that campus because that campus may have had a lower threshold for that event, right? But the idea is if you can't confirm that risk with other sources in the area, then you have a problem.
And my feeling was, sure, if they want to alert their campus community about a potential risk for severe storm, I think they're whatever the word is, to do that. Well justified, thank you, to do that. But to use wording that we in the enterprise, tornado warning, has such a specific meaning. And that's where I think the police department and then the student group who's just automatically retweeting without any verification, without any attribution, got themselves in trouble that day. So we have to agree, even though there's the Weather Service and all of this private enterprise that we have, we have to have some rules that we agree to, even though we're competitors in some cases in this room.
And that's a fair point. And that's why this research is kind of cool. You know, again, I'm not here to criticize anything you're doing. If anything, I appreciate how doing media situational awareness, just watching what you all do and the differences in your graphics. I'm not doing it to criticize. I'm doing it because there are so many different ways to make a graphic, so many different icons you could put on, right? So, but the thing is, what kind of guidance are you using? Are we just doing it because a consultant said to do so? Sometimes. Sometimes, if there are any consultants out there listening, you know, marketing is one thing, risk communication is another. They're cousins, they're related sciences, true. But one is, the dependent variable, what's driving both of them is a little bit different. And in broadcast meteorology, we want to empower people to make good risk decisions. And if they make good risk decisions, not based on our judgment, but based on their own individual, we can't tell people what to do, we just empower them to understand their risk. They will trust you more, and that trust will get you your viewership. So in my view, TV consultants should be concerned about effective risk communication. Because if you're not effective, you're losing viewers. You lose viewers, and you're losing. Let's just be frank, right? You need viewers. But risk communication is fundamentally at the bottom of that.
Gina, and we focused in on this tornado warning, but I really think human nature, we as a people forget about what true risk is. I mean, to be honest, the risk from so many other weather events is way higher than a tornado in the area. They'll take action with that. But you're saying concrete evidence.
Right.
More than 70% of injuries and fatalities in flooding happens in cars.
Right.
With visual proof in front of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And barriers.
Yeah.
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 So
this is hard. This is hard, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. Are you honestly telling me, again, this is the humble moment, you have to assess yourself. In every tornado warning, do you go into your basement? I'm not gonna ask you to get the mic for that, okay? In every flood warning, do you just not go out and drive?
No, but as an example, I actually now, I mean, I always will turn around because if my car gets stuck, man, that's the end of my career.
Certainly. But Doug, you've probably driven in the Rock Creek Parkway. Okay, now I know if there's a flood warning day, I just avoid the road. I actually, I'm risk averse. I avoid it. But there are some days where it's just raining lightly. There's no flood warning, and I just thought to myself, like, man, what if something? Maybe I shouldn't be on this road. And then I thought about in rush hour, how on earth would I turn around on the Rock Creek Parkway? Honest to goodness gracious, there is no space to turn around if you've got, traffic in the other lane. You can't turn around. You're stuck. You're stuck. So it's harder than we talk about these actions in totality as if it's so easy to do. And I really think that the name of the game here is empathy. I know it frustrates you because your job is to empower people to understand their risk. You want to save their lives. I get it. I'm in this with you. But we've got to empathize, again, that when there's a flood warning, where, which stream, which road, again, think about their small footprint. Are you basically, when I lived in upstate New York in Ithaca, we had flood warnings, and literally I'm looking at it, and I'm going, where in this county is it? Like, where should I not drive? Or are you just telling me I shouldn't go out anywhere in Tompkins County, right? And it's not that easy. And I defend those who issued the flood warning. Indeed, they should have. But the issue is that flood warning, guess what? It's still abstract to me because I have no idea where the flood is. That's the challenge for us from a physical science and a social science point of view is to close the distance. And I think that's just going to take time. Yes, we'll go here. What's the time check too, Dave?
We're about 28.
Okay, so we're still okay.
Jim Gandy, WLTX in Columbia, South Carolina. Got a real problem.
Yeah.
2015, we had historic floods. Yeah. And we're on the air. We have been on the air for an hour to an hour and a half. We have a camera and a crew that's set up, and they're filming the flood as it happens. We know exactly where the flood is. We know exactly what's going on, and we're broadcasting it. Yeah. And we can already show everybody, and we have been, the vehicles that have driven into it and have stalled and now are just flooded.
Right.
And yet there are still vehicles that approach that area. They see the vehicles ahead of them are underwater and they go into it anyway. Now, when the National
You have
Weather
to be highly motivated to do that.
You must be, because the National Weather Service asked me in the follow-up survey and said, what can we do to keep those people from doing that? I said, shoot them. Because that's the only thing.
Okay, but wait, again, I'm going to empathize because I can come up with at least 3 examples right now of our own community where we've lost lives, okay?
I'm bringing this up.
Let's hold on, because again, check your pulse. Are you alive? You're human. It's not them. It's not us versus them. We're people. We're highly motivated.
No, but what I'm bringing...
The very sad story coming out of Houston during Harvey of, I believe it was a cop, I think, that wanted to get back to help rescue. And he lost his life in the process.
I understand that.
I don't dismiss. I understand. He was highly motivated.
But
it was at the time for him probably an excellent decision. I can't sit here and berate that. He lost his life with good, highly motivated reasoning.
I understand that,
What
but here's
about
something
the
that I don't
station-
understand.
The TV station in Florence who was underwater, how come they didn't leave? What about the storm chasers? You guys, I can show examples of our own community making the same decisions. You know, if we're gonna give some tough love to our viewers, dude, it's my responsibility to give a little bit of tough love back.
Okay, but here's the problem. We don't understand how they can make that decision.
It's human. They're highly...
You've got to do better than that.
Yeah, well, then we need to invest a little bit more in social behavioral science to understand
agree.
that. Okay, so let your folks know, let your Congress people know, NSF, NOAA, you know. I'm not a federal government employee. Let me reiterate that. You're right. I do think we have a lot more to learn. And like I said, in many ways, I think I might start with all of you. Just because you are highly motivated, you understand all of the information, and yet we too still make decisions that feel dissonant. Man, I mean, Jimmy, my significant other, is in the back of the room because I don't think you've ever heard my dissertation presentation. So, you know, and I called him about... yeah.
He sat between her and Howard.
He did. He's a good man. But there was a severe thunderstorm. Oh, man, I forget what month this was, maybe June. And Doug, I think I was listening to your station. I had a bunch of stuff up on Twitter, and we had a couple tornado warnings with it a little bit further west, but they were getting closer, and my anxiety was starting to increase. And we had, I think, like baseball-sized hail or something rather large, a little bit further west, like Fairfax, a little bit further out. And I'm calling him, and I'm like, what do I do? Because all of a sudden, the impact is coming towards me. And I'm like, I'm going to move my car to the garage across the street because the one thing I can do is control damage to my car. So I did. And I'm nervous now because I'm a nervous ninny. I'm risk averse. So I moved my car across the street. I'm on the phone with him. How much time do I have before I can get home? So I get home. And I'm watching everything, and I'm texting with my aunt who lives at Dunloring Metro, so Merrifield, Fairfax area. And she tells me, I didn't have all the facts at the time, All I was told was our window just blew out. They're on the 4th level of a condo at Dunloring Metro, and I'm thinking, holy, there's gotta be a tornado or something. So I felt like an idiot. But I took my bike helmet, I put sneakers on, I grabbed my no-weather radio, my cell phone, and I ran to my safe place in my condo because I identified my tornado safe place. But I gotta tell you, I'm the only one down there. I felt like when you're the only one, you feel socially distant from everyone around you, right? I get it.
Especially when you're wearing a bike helmet.
Well, in all fairness, I didn't put it on, but I just, because.
Do you have a selfie of that?
I don't have a selfie of that moment. I do have a selfie of me on what is called Safe Place Selfie Day. The NWA does, and Weather Ready Nation, they do a safe place selfie, take a selfie where your safe place is. So I do have one of that with my bike. But you feel awkward. I mean, how many of you have gotten in a tub and brought your mattress with you? Okay, so we have one person.
I've gotten in the tub, though.
I went as a kid, but it's hard, unless your mattress is sitting against the wall in the bathroom. Literally, have you done the things we tell people to do, have you done them? I can't lift my mattress by myself. I'm not bringing it 2 flights of stairs down to the basement of my condo. I just think we've got to empathize a little bit more that these decisions are so personal and they're not as easy as we say it on air. I think that's what this is telling me a little bit, right? Yes.
Can I bring it back to your research
Yeah,
now?
you can. Thank you.
Because those were all great points. But I think Jim identified your second doctoral thesis. I'm going to give you a third.
Oh, boy.
So I grew up and did my, by the way, I'm Mike Augustinak, WCCO TV in Minneapolis. I've worked there for over 10 years, but I worked in Albany, New York for almost 10 years. And I would say that one thing that could possibly account for the difference in the non-indexical reaction by these massholes is that they're not used to seeing velocity data and radar data in a setting like this, whereas where I am now, we have a much more weather savvy viewing audience, and I just wonder how that number would differ in different areas of the country.
If I were still in academia, I wanted to take these dials to Oklahoma, to Alabama, and see what this is like in other locations, because you're right. But I still think this is interesting because at least if you're in the Northeast or even mid-Atlantic, we do get occasional, probably a little bit more often than the Northeast, although this particular year, the Northeast, I think, had, I'm looking at Jimmy, more tornadoes, I think, than Oklahoma. They were all EF0s, EF1s, but actually our climate in terms of where storms, right, it's kind of changing a little bit. So this is interesting for those who perhaps have lower experience with this data. So how that might, and I have another study to show you that will play into experience. Yes, if we can get a mic over here. And then we'll go to Doug. And then we'll get back to this so that we can fly through some more slides.
So Tony Giannidis at BU, and I just wanted to ask you a different sort of question. I mean, one of the things that we've learned from what you've talked about so far is that photographs win, videos win.
Yep.
Right, but that also assumes that they're truth. Well, that's no longer true in today's world. And
you
I mean,
take,
you don't have to be
images from the day after tomorrow or Twister or whatever and show them, and you think it's photographic evidence.
Well, and even in what people are exposed to every single day on the web, photographs aren't truth, and at least not in the way we all grew up understanding them, because they're so easily manipulated.
Well,
so now what?
Yeah, well, even to the point I think Greg Fischel made earlier is that you can have a tornado on the ground in one place and you can show that photo, right? And that photo is indeed true at that one point in time, but systems change. Things evolve, right? So that photo isn't true 20 minutes later, right? And so how has the data changed? And should we constantly be showing that right now because we might be giving a false alarm effect? But this is complicated. I'm not here to say any of this is easy. And in fact, my final slides are basically the discussion that we're having. Jeff, you're bringing up some of the things. I'm not a practitioner in the way that you all are. While I like to feel socially close to all of you, I don't do it day in and day out. There's so many different things we could or couldn't do with different effects, such as false alarm. So how do we make sense of this? And to the earlier point, I do think we need more research in this area to help guide what we do. So Doug, you'll get the last one before we jump back in.
And it's a lot about our language, Doug Cameron, our WRC in Washington, to Greg's point and to what we're really talking about here. With a tornado like that we're not exactly sure if it's on the ground or not,
you know, would I be calling my wife at home and telling her, hey, you need to get inside? Yes, I would.
Yeah.
Now, would I worry too much about it if I'm in the house and I'm looking at this? No. But if I'm looking at a tornadic signature and I've got a debris ball coming over my house, you better believe I'm going to be in my, you know,
Right.
now, how many times has that happened in my life? None.
Right.
You know, how many times will that ever happen? Most likely 0 where I am.
Right.
But I am telling those people that, and if in our language denotes that. So you talk
Right.
about uncertainty with us.
Right.
There's a lot of times where we have a lot less uncertainty when we are confident. When we are confident,
Yeah.
that's when I think we are at our best. And,
Yes.
and obviously that's going to go toward the viewer as well.
And I completely agree. And you know, you can keep adding more columns in the data. And if I worked with, say, someone who's an expert in rhetoric, they probably could have coded tone in the audio. So I coded the audio, but I didn't code tone, for example. I could have worked with someone who was more expert in that and captured that, because perhaps it's how you're saying what you're saying, right? Like, there are a lot of limitations here. I'm the first to admit it. There are probably 25 pages dedicated in my dissertation to limitations, but this begins to make us think differently. All right, is it very related to this? Because I want to make sure we jar one more, and I
All
swear
right,
that's
sorry.
it. We're going to jump in.
Jennifer Okavina, WPSD. I think tone is the biggest feedback I've gotten on their level of concern, is
Yeah.
they can tell there's a difference
Yeah.
when you're highly concerned.
And again, going back to those different types of distances, if they feel socially close to you, then your tone is going to make a difference, right? I love my parents. When they yelled at me, I knew it was really bad, right? Because I knew my parents didn't want to yell at me for fun. So, you know, oh, shoot, like I did something. Okay, I gotta listen to my parents, right? So tone really does matter. Okay, so let's jump in again. All right, so I want to go back now. All right, so research question 4 was, all right, so yes, I coded your audio. Yes, we threw it in to the type. I had a different question. Like, maybe we changed our language. So the threat messages that were uncertain doesn't mean you were only using threat messages on non-photographs. You could use uncertain language on photographs, okay? So then I thought to myself, well, wait, maybe you all are using more uncertain language with non-photographs than you are for photographs. So I want to go back to what you wrote down at the beginning of this session, and let's just see what you wrote. So I have a photograph of a tornado, and we have a radar image with a nice hook echo there. So would anyone like to read their description for us? Okay, do you have a microphone here? Perfect, we'll read a couple up here at front.
So yeah, I was pretty straightforward. The first one, I just a hook echo, likely tornado on the radar.
Likely, so
and
it's
then,
a hedging word.
Yeah, so then on the right I said confirmed tornado.
Okay, that's about as certain as you get, right? Yeah, so others will pass the mic next door.
Pretty similar to what Brad said. I said for the first one, radar shows a hook echo, which shows rotation in the clouds, strongly indicates a tornado. So again, hedging.
Well, that's actually not bad. Actually, there isn't a whole heck of a lot of hedging language in that. That's pretty good.
And then for the tornado, I said tornado on the ground. You can see the debris ball, and this is a dangerous storm. And then I kind of wrote in my notes, moving toward, because I didn't, from the picture, I can't tell which way it's moving, but in real time, I probably had a sense with other data of which way that was moving.
Yeah. Others, yeah.
For the first one, this is a supercell storm. It's a dangerous storm. Second one was, this is an active tornado. It's an immediate danger to those in the path.
So this is fascinating because even just reading 3 examples in the room actually shows what the data shows. So mind you, this is a small data set, and I would love, if I could get my hands on transcripts across all your broadcasts and code them for photograph versus non-photograph and throw this into the software, I'd love to see it, because I'm still, I don't know, this is pretty good because it confirms what I found, but I still have a hunch that we hedge. We got one more? Yeah.
I made an assumption that you in a very rare case, actually had both of these at the same time to show to viewers. The only example, I think, in real time is when you get a sheriff deputy reporting that they saw a tornado on the ground.
Yeah.
So the words I wrote here were just tornado emergency for ... wherever this area is, with a tornado currently on the ground.
Yeah.
And then, to what he was just saying, Jeff, about which direction it's moving.
Yeah, I purposely didn't give you any additional. I thought about trying to split you guys in 2 groups, show the radar first and the other group would see, and then see if you saw relationships between the 2, or if you communicated, because I didn't tell you there was an inherent relationship between but so this is, again, I just love observing all of you. This is really interesting. All right, so we'll take 2 more.
It's interesting you talk about the actual visual picture versus the implied result of what you're seeing with the radar. And to believe it or not, I believe the left picture much more than I believe the right, because I don't know where the right one is.
Yeah.
I think if that came in saying I took this at 2 p.m.
Absolutely.
in whatever field, then I'd say, and we do have confirmation that there is a tornado somewhere in this region, because, I mean, I don't know that the picture helps your forecast more than the radar helps your picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying we can
Right.
say that, but.
Right. Yeah, I didn't give you a lot of information, right? So you had a lot of guessing to do in terms of your description. Paul? Oh, do we have a mic in the back? Sorry. Pass it back.
Paul, Goodlow Weather Channel. On the left, you have Supercell Classic Hook Echo where the tornado would be. On the right, confirmed tornado, you can see the debris being kicked up from the ground. I also went on to say, I'd like to see the correlation coefficient on the
Hey,
radar
weather producer. Could
to
you
see the debris signature so people can learn
Yeah.
what our tools are used for.
Yeah.
And if you don't have visual proof,
Yeah.
we can kind of go back and forth with confirmation of this is what you see
Very cool.
non-photographically
Yep.
with our tools, and this is what you see on the ground.
Yeah. So this is awesome, and you guys are pros, so maybe this is why I'm not finding anything in the data. So essentially, so no and yes. So you didn't differentiate for hedging. So I use this software called Luke, Linguistic Inquiry Word Count, and it can look at, we created 2 separate documents, one for the language on photographs, one for the language on non-photographs, and they look for certain words, and then they do a t-test to see if there's a statistical difference, and there weren't. So they looked for words, like they look at present versus future verb tense, right? So could be, would be, will be, things, you know, should, would, could. Tentativeness, maybe, perhaps, right? They're looking for uncertainty language. There was no difference, so in fact, we're not seeing any here either, so this is kind of cool. But one difference we did find is there's a reason why I was transcribing a lot. You have to use more words to describe non-photographs than you do photographs. And I think that's really interesting. So I do have a sort of a takeaway. Howard, do you have something to say on that?
Yeah, well, when I'm showing, and Paul, I'll show velocity on air, and my station manager's not too happy, but I draw a circle around the couplet. I'll draw arrows with the wind direction, and I think it's my job to translate certain things, because our viewers don't look at velocity or correlation coefficient. But if we're looking at them, we have to use more words to explain the unknown to the viewer and bring them along with us. I don't think it's bad that we use them, but we have to be cognizant of the fact that they probably are ignorant of what we're showing them. So,
and I've got another study in like 2 slides where we're going to break this down even further. And it relates to a lot of what you're saying. So you should keep showing your non-photographs, okay? We got to find a way to do this in a way that, again, decreases the distance. So the answer was no and yes. I do find it fascinating. I mean, it makes sense. Like a photograph in many ways speaks for itself, whereas if you're not an expert in radar or, you know, dual pole correlation coefficients while showing velocity data, you're going to need some words to describe that, right? So what does this research say? In general, it tells me visual type does matter. So what you show matters. I don't think this proves exactly how yet. It's only one study, right? But at the very least, what this showed was photographs evoke higher perceived risk and less perceived uncertainty. Conversely, they felt more certain, right? The words you use with visuals matter, okay? That's really important, okay? So efficacy messages really work very well with photographs. They were, you know, rather soberly falling short for our non-photographs. We'll talk about that. And then one of my third takeaways was you need more airtime, you know, because these non-photographs, they do require technical explanation. You guys are brilliant in the way that you translate it in ways that makes it close, right? I don't like calling it you simplify. It's not about that. You know, I want my doctors to be a doctor. I want my dentist to be a dentist. I want my auto mechanic to be an auto mechanic. I don't want those people to be meteorologists, right? Because I want them to be expert in whatever they're expert in, right? So I don't like the word simplify. I like saying we've reduced the psychological distance. You're translating in a way that makes the information more close to them. Simple makes it seem like they're misinformed or uneducated. That's not true. They're just not living in the world you're living in, and to that I say that's okay because we need diversity of expertise. So we've got We'll do 1, 2, and then try to get back for the sake of time.
Love to hear your thoughts on to what degree is this a question of a 2D image versus a 3D image? And if that 2D image was indeed a much more sophisticated 3D image that people could wrap their heads around. I mean, how much of that is our brain saying that can't be real?
So let's talk about that, because one of my last slides talks about virtual reality, and the Weather Channel has done some really cool things, especially this last hurricane season. So I think we should talk about that. So let me try to fly through some of these, this next study, and let's dig into some of this, because I think this is where the bread and butter of this discussion really is the what do we do with it? Okay, I'm going to fly. All right, so number 2 was the most concerning to me, the fact that these efficacy messages were falling short on these non-photographs. Indeed, what our world is non-photographic in many of the ways that we're describing risk. We're describing future risks. We have to depend on non-photographs. So we weren't satisfied, so we did another study. Okay, so in this case, we didn't use dials. We used an experimental survey. This was Sea Grant's Sandy Supplemental, the Coastal Storm Awareness Program. It was my postdoc post-dissertation. So we were using kind of the same ideas. So this is now, instead of using students, this is a more generalizable sample of folks on the coast in New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. So for some of you from that area, probably a little bit more relevant to your areas. In particular, what was important is that we looked at previous experience, because we thought, you know, maybe experience is playing a role here. And you all brought that up, and that was something we didn't measure in the dial study. So maybe there's a difference in how people are interpreting these photos versus non-photos if they have experience, right? The other thing we did was we also measured behavioral intention in a thought answer, meaning so after they had the information, we asked them to type out like what they would do with the information, and we coded whether they said they would evacuate. So we looked at, because we were looking at Sandy, we wanted to try to use something rather simple, but we didn't necessarily want to, I mean, literally these are the things we think about. Like if we called it Julie, it had 2 syllables, and we didn't want people to think about Sandy, so we were trying to think about something incredibly simple. So we just called it Hurricane Pat. Yes, people were like, wow, we got to P in the alphabet. You have no idea how difficult it is to make an experimental survey, because the questions people think about, well, how come you didn't pick A? Well, that's the beginning. Yeah, you see how complicated this is. So what we tried to do is the survey, we kind of wrote it like we were broadcast meteorologists writing a blog post. So it was like a forecast. We literally called it a Hurricane Pat forecast update. You're giving an update on the status of the storm. We had 3 conditions, okay? So this is what it looks like. The control condition was just the text, okay? The photo condition was a photo of storm surge. In particular, we wanted to see, since storm surge is a large contributor to loss of life in hurricanes, we wanted to measure the effects of storm surge. So we used a photo of storm surge as compared to the new storm surge flooding map that the Hurricane Center uses. This was an example prior to the Hurricane Center was one of our operational partners on this. So thank you to them for their service a couple years ago in helping us with this research. So this is what the 3 conditions look like. You were only assigned to 1. Okay, so we're comparing across our samples of people who are either were in the control, map, or photo. Okay, so here's some of the data. So now you've got to kind of change your view. We're looking at different, so now we measured experience. So we have low experience on the left, high experience on the right, okay? And the photo is the solid line, the dotted black is the map, and the dark gray is the control. So it's just the text, okay? So if we dive into the data here a little bit, indeed, very similar to my dissertation work, we see the same thing on this side of the graph, okay? The photo did indeed prompt higher risk judgments, another measure of perceived risk, okay? We called it risk judgments. Indeed, the photo prompted higher perceived risk judgments for the low experience. So both the map and the control had no difference. So interestingly, we could have just given them the text without the map, and really, it wasn't statistically significant difference. So you can see at least it is a little bit different, but again, from a meaningful difference, no. So if we look at, okay, again, so I made that clear. You can see the means here. I mean, they're barely different. That's not a meaningful difference between the 2. So if we look at the direct hurricane experience, right, so they've got low experience versus high experience, okay? So again, looking at this data, we look at the low experience, that the map is you know, has a higher perceived risk judgment. If we compare low experience to high direct experience now, it reverses. Okay? So now, if you have direct experience with a hurricane, okay, direct experience means something's more concrete, means we've reduced psychological distance. Do you see why I started out with construal level theory? All starting to come together for you? Now, you see that the map and control were higher than the photo. So now we're beginning to see if people have direct experience, your non-photos now have more meaning. However, here was the kicker. So we measured that behavioral intention across both low and high experience. The the photo condition still prompted, and this was statistically significant, so this was meaningful. The photo condition prompted a higher percentage of people to say that they would be likely to evacuate. Okay. And that was across both low and high experience. So I still think something's going on here. However, I think what this tells me is if we can create that direct experience with our non-photographs, it starts having meaning. A radar is almost like a photo for you. When you see a radar, you know it's raining or snowing, right? Because it's so close to you. You have direct experience of the relationship between the two. Not all of our audiences have that direct relationships. Okay, so what's going on? Here was one of the things that we hypothesized. So there's something called the identifiable victim effect. You've probably fallen prey to this yourself because, again, this is human nature. You're human, okay? We are more likely to donate money, in fact, twice as much money, to Rokia on the left side of this graphic because she's identifiable. We are less likely to give money to a cause on the right that is showing the masses, unidentified folks, or statistics. So we wonder if that's what's happening with our photos and our non-photos. The image of the storm surge with the house is a single identifiable impact, as compared to our non-photos, which are showing a large area, kind of emphasizing statistics and impacts without identified people or impacts. And is that what's occurring in the psychology of how we are processing that data? We're not totally sure, but that's our hypothesis in terms of what might be happening. So the outcome of this is bring the risk even closer to your viewers. So we started from out of this world, right? And indeed, every time we make a forecast, we start with data from out of this world. I mean, really, like, hold on to that for a moment and think about how cool that is. Wow. We take that and we turn it into data, right? And we process it and we put it into, forecast data that you can then interpret. And we get Doug Kammerer and we get our forecast. And then Doug Kammerer can show us our photo of the snow. And the point is that we have to find ways to show the proof of the impact. So I've been trying to think about, what some of these takeaways are and what we may need to do. So we need to reduce psychological distance. Jeff, I don't have all the answers on how, but I think you've got some neat ideas to hypothesize or try. Photographs help make your messages more concrete, especially for those that don't have experience. Conveying behavioral recommendations with your photographs prompts the highest perceived risk. I have a suggestion on the next slide for that. People with experience have context in which to make sense of non-photographic images. I'm also going to emphasize, while my talk was not on probabilities, people they can handle uncertainty and probabilities. They can. The issue is that oftentimes a probability by itself doesn't have context. You have the context. So it's kind of the same thing. We just have to provide that concreteness, that meaningful information. To quote my boyfriend, Jimmy Correa, anyone can make a mean, anyone can make an average. Anyone can make a mean. Not everyone can make it meaningful. Okay? And that's our job, is to make that data meaningful. So here are some broad suggestions. Show photographs more often where you can. When you show non-photos like storm surge or rainfall, something that's like a little bit abstract, show a past photo of what that looked like in your area. So if you're expecting 10 inches of rain and you know it's going to have an impact, go back and show Ellicott City under 10 inches of rain. But explain that was 10 inches under this short period of time. We don't know that this impact will happen, but it is possible. But it provides, I don't know. And again, your questions about false alarm, I'm right there with you. We've got to think about this. But these are some of the ideas. convey the behavioral recommendations. Y'all need to work with your news team on this, especially for long fuse, like tropical events. I hear a lot of broadcasters tell me, well, we're not in charge of the behavioral recommendations. That's the emergency managers. You're right. I support you on that. Bring them in, but really help work with them prior to hurricane season. What's the story? What are the things you can record before hurricane season so that you are ready to explain what to do? We were talking to an emergency manager from Walmart at AMS last week, and he was like, you know, showing empty shelves doesn't help anybody. Now, you may say, sure, there might be like a little advertising edge if you show a store that does have full shelves, but the thing is, from a risk perspective, if you show an empty shelf and I haven't bought water yet, now I feel hopeless. Where the heck am I supposed to go, right? So yes, you can show that, but then at least say, hey, these are the places that still have, right? Work with your news team to create a hurricane team experience where you're working together to communicate. You're in charge of the risk. You got enough full-time job on that. Make your team feel like they're part of that efficacy message and work with your emergency managers prior to that. Doug, microphone, if we have it. Oh,
yep.
You got it.
Just a kind of a point here. Does anybody have weather bug cameras? I mean, anybody have them? Yeah, we used to. We don't have them anymore. I wish to God I did, because they are just a fantastic tool to be able to use, because there's so many of them. In our area, we had over 100 cameras. I mean, that's just a fantastic tool to use.
Yeah.
Most of us have drive time cameras now. That's another one that we do.
Yep.
And the one thing that we have to do that I know I've had a lot of pushback within the newsroom, and I've won this battle, is getting our crews farther away from our downtown areas. You know, getting them into, for example, with the Sunday storm, send them to Hagerstown. It's an hour and a half away, but that's the first area that's going to see the 30-degree temperature drop, so that we can watch that come in. And that's what you're talking about with pictures. That's why we have these drive time cameras. So many of us have them now, and it's not just my storm team 4x4. Now we retrofit everything with the drive time. We can go live with all of that.
We
So
may
that
want to
helps.
expand based on how communication has changed. You know, the National Weather Service has the Storm Spotter program, which is very, very cool. Might your station think about having, you know, your own storm spotters, but they're on social media, and you've met them, so you can create that trusted, so that, again, that idea that not all photographs are photographic proof. Some people misinterpret. Sometimes it looks like a tornado, but it's a smokestack, for example, right? So we do have to give care to that.
Yeah.
Yes, other idea. We got lots of hands here.
I was just going to say, that's exactly what we've done at our station. Is we have a group of spotters, and we have a closed Facebook group for them. And the beauty of
It's a great idea.
We've trained them, and we all run through this with stuff we can use on the air, ask permission. Well, it's implicit when you're in the group. Anything posted in there is fair game to use on air, including video, and all our producers and everybody's on there. But it's great. It's already a vetted group of people that we're not going to get a Sheriff NATO, picture come in. We're going to get legit stuff, but it's amazing. And it's also great for the news department, because, you know, we can't send crews everywhere. So now we have 600 people in these remote areas, and we've actually done Skype interviews with them. They do walk and talks for us. It's amazing what you can do. And to Doug's point about cameras, I mean, the great thing about technology is you don't have to rely on sophisticated webcams or WeatherBug. You know, I put up a $150 Nest Cam on my roof that we bring into our Mac system, and we do time lapses. I caught my first fireball last week. It's just, these things are amazing, and they're really cheap, but their quality is amazing. But anybody can go buy these and put them up all over the place. You just need power and Wi-Fi. And you really can expand your pictures.
I'm going to go in the back, Jeff.
Yeah, I just want to, Jeff Baradelli again. I just want to go back to what someone in this room said about looking at the reaction of your meteorologist. You know, how are we reacting? And do we have a visceral reaction to what's happening? Because we tend to become computers when we're in severe weather. We're scientists. We go very science. But the reality is there's been a few times in my career, not many, where I've actually put some real thought into a situation, because I realized this was an unprecedented situation. And if they can see, in all honesty, the fear or concern in your eyes, because they can tell that, those are subtle cues, I think that makes a big difference. So I would say if you can stop for a second during these major situations and actually connect emotionally yourself. Hey, Aunt Sally, you live in this part of town. Please get in the basement right now. And everybody at home's thinking, wow, he just told Aunt Sally to get in the basement. And I will just two quick examples. During Michael, when it was about to hit, when I was on the air, I said, you have never, if you are going to be in the middle of this storm, in the middle of the core eye wall of the storm, you have never experienced a storm like this ever in your existence, ever. And let me ask, and I said, and if you think you have not. So, and the reason why I said that is because a lot of people on the Florida Panhandle will be like, whatever, I've been through 5 hurricanes.
Right.
And unless they were through Andrew, then they have never experienced the eye wall of a storm like that.
And the challenge with that, what I hear to that is, I've never experienced this before. This is very abstract to me. How do I?
Well, it was 2 hours before the storm hit, so it was basically like go to your basement.
This was the last haul to get people out there. Sure, and I appreciate that. But I think we have to think about, going back to your point about, empathy. Essentially, that's what this is, and I agree. And again, it's not a criticism of anyone. We're all doing our jobs. The viewers are doing their jobs to understand their risk. You're doing your job to convey the risk. And yes, you're not a robot, but you're in a routine. Yeah. That's human. Human loves routine, right? So you're in your weather communication routine. The thing that we need to appreciate on the other end is what you're asking your viewers to do is break their routine. Yeah. So appreciate that for a second. What you're asking to do is not go to work, not stay at home, go somewhere where so I think that's where, and it's easier to do this in the off season than it is in the moment, and I wish I could provide a service during events where we could literally have weather therapy for an hour, like you have an hour off during an event. You don't. But a check-in with you, I could be available for you. Do you need an empathy check? Because I'm being serious.
Yeah.
One, so that I can empathize with you in the tough job that you have during these events, regardless of what they are, but also to make sure that you haven't lost the perspective that you're in a routine and you're asking your viewers to break theirs.
Right.
Right, so you've got to have that two-way dynamic.
But if Jim Gandy gets on the air, and I'm a meteorologist myself, if I'm in his market and I'm watching on air and I see tears coming out of his eyes, I'm heading for the basement. So the point is if people have seen you and watched you long enough,
Yes.
right,
And
then
that's the
your
point.
visceral reaction can create a visceral reaction in them.
If I were to go back to those 4 types of distance, right, in many ways, you're trying to hit upon all of them, right? Temporally, we're communicating risks over time. So the risk is going to change, right? It's going to become more concrete, hopefully. The winter storms where the spread gets wider is tough, right, when you're at day 1, right? So, but hopefully time is becoming more concrete. Spatially, the risk is coming closer, right? Because so you almost don't have a choice about that. You're going to be conveying those differences. You've got that hypothetical distance, which is trying to communicate the likelihood of that event occurring. And then the last one is that social distance. And I think what's so tough about your job is you have to reduce the distance on all 4 of those. And that's what I think, when I really look at the role and the jobs you have, you got one heck of a responsibility. And you do it quite well. Which one of these will help people, empower them to, take action? I don't know. We'd have to do more studies.
We have 2 last questions.
Okay.
We're about 10 minutes over.
Okay.
Kent Earhart from St. Louis. We just recently had a super high impact foot of snow. We haven't talked a lot about snow, but when it comes to impact,
huge.
There's nothing more spatially significant, perhaps in these threats that we're talking about. One of the things that I see, and we had people that were stuck on the road for 16 hours because of closed highways and impassable roads. And one of the things that I suggested is that we begin to accumulate an archive of stills and video, because we don't get snows like that often, and accumulate those videos and say, now the last time we saw 4 inches of snow on the ground during an evening commute, this is what it looked like.
Yes.
And showing that video
Yes.
and our coverage
Exactly.
and saying, so this is what you may be looking at tomorrow at this time, or 2 days from now at this time.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to say was we used to have a news director. This kind of goes back to the presentation part of what we talked about. We had a news director or assistant news director one time that used to really pound on me about show me the process. And it was back when the models were still being printed on paper in the weather office. Yeah. And he literally loved it when I would do a tease going into a break and hold up the paper and say, this is This is the latest model that just came in.
Yeah.
And I'm going to share the results of this with you in a moment. And then in tornado coverage, one of the things that I found to be very effective has been, now half the time the model I was holding wasn't even valid, by the way. I should probably add that. But tornado coverage and talking about velocity data and the public's misunderstanding, there is an educational component to that, but I don't think during that emergency is the time to be doing that.
Sure.
And so my method of operation in the past has been, bear with me for a moment. I'm going to be looking at something that won't make any sense to you, and then drawing a circle around the couplet and saying, this is the area, maybe one sentence. I'm looking at velocity data. This is showing me the winds inside.
Yep.
This is the area of threat, and this is where it's moving.
And this is where what I would say is if you have an SPC outlook, right, in your area in day 3, you're looking like you might have severe weather. The day before, do a Facebook Live where you say, hey, we might have severe weather tomorrow. I thought I'd take a chance to walk you through some of the graphics you might see. Walk them through radar velocity, how cool dual pole is. It has some really cool, powerful data. But you're right. You're not going to, especially in tornado land, man, you don't have a lot of time to communicate risk, right? It's short fuse. And the fact that at least in the severe weather study, you need more words. You need more time when you're looking at radar. So you may want to use your social media. I know you have to do, I don't envy all the platforms you have to use, but perhaps you use them differently. You used, what we see in some of the survey data of how people are getting information. Yes, for a lot of day-to-day, they're going to apps. But let me tell you, when it comes to big events, any hazard, they're going to you and they're going on air. With that, why? Because I'm scared, I have anxiety, and guess what? I want a person, not an app, to calm me down and tell me what to do. So your role is so important, but perhaps we need to use those different mediums differently at different stages. So use your SPC outlooks, use them differently to give people a chance for what they're seeing. At the beginning of hurricane season, you don't have a hurricane yet, fantastic. Walk them through some of the new products that you might see, walk them through it. Have that conversation with your viewers earlier, especially if you might have a down news day and perhaps you get an extra 2 minutes or something.
Greg?
Yeah. Greg Fischel, WRAL. I'm actually asking you a question, and yours and anybody else's opinion here, on the non-photograph thing, like supposing you have a radar-indicated tornado, but you're not sure. If there's a 30% chance of rain today, I'm still playing golf, okay?
Yeah.
If there's a 30% chance that I'm going to die in a tornado, or a 30% chance I'm going to get food poisoning at the restaurant that I had a reservation at tonight, that same percentage means something very different.
Yep.
And so would it be helpful in the non-photograph thing to say, okay, we can't confirm that this is on the ground, but do you really want to play with this? Do you want to play Russian roulette with your life?
Yeah. I mean, in that case, I think that the tornado warning radar indicated, I think, is so difficult because almost by the nature that we're saying, well, it's only radar indicated, we're downplaying the data. It does. And even your large wedge tornadoes, they started out radar indicated, and it might be that they became the wedge within a very short period of time. That may be true, but every tornado at some point was only radar indicated. So I think we have to say this is our first piece of evidence, trying to use the non-hedging language that you also beautifully did in the front row. This is our first piece of evidence of a tornado in our area. While we don't have photographic proof of this, the risk is real. The risk is real. I'm not joking about that. I can't, we cannot confirm it true, but the risk is real. In light of this, I strongly encourage you to do X, Y, or Z. One of the questions I had for the physical science community is, are we getting so good that we can differentiate the storms where you only need to go inside away from windows as compared to inside and in a basement, in a closet, as low, are we that good yet? And I can't answer that. I'm not on the physical science side. I can't answer that. And if we're not sure, then I would say if it's radar indicated, we've got to tell people what to do and what action to take. So yes, the probability question is probably a different presentation.
Gina, thank you very much. How about a round of applause for Gina? Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm going to do one thing with you. You said if you took a selfie in front of this room, it would prove that you were here.
I prove,
so
yes.
Turn around
Okay,
right here,
okay.
and I'll take a selfie of you with everybody. Right? Oh, right. It's a meefy.
It's just a photo, Dave.
It's just a photo.
Yes.
I'm just going to take a photo.
Yes,
Right.
okay.
Gina, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So for those of you watching online, this has been terrific. We've gotten some comments online. Thank you for the A++++ content. So it's been great feedback. Tomorrow let's take a look at the agenda for tomorrow just to let everybody know what's happening. We're going to kick off the day with Dr. Ellen Prager. She's going to talk about how do you communicate all sorts of sciences that you're asked to communicate that you might not be trained for. This is going to be a terrific presentation. And then also Rick Thoman is here from University of Alaska in Fairbanks talking about climate and extreme weather impacts in Alaska. And then we're going to finish the day tomorrow with Jeff Baradelli, who's a meteorologist and climate contributor for CBS News. Jeff has a great and interesting career path. Maybe he'll talk about that a little bit. And of course, every day we're starting the day off with a live weather briefing from Dale Eck at the Weather Company. And so we hope you join us back tomorrow. We hope you enjoyed today. Love the comments. Keep them coming in as well as questions. And we'll see you back here tomorrow, probably from a snowy Breckenridge, Colorado. Take care, everybody, and have a good rest of the day.